Well, welcome back to Daily Driving of Cummins. In lieu of waiting on machine shop parts, I've decided to work on my RV. So I'm going to make a little video about air conditioning in my RV because it just quit working last summer and I didn't really know anything about RV AC units. So I did some research and here we go. So in the process of watching YouTube videos about how to fix my or diagnose my AC unit, because I was really hoping I didn't have to buy a new one, and it turns out I don't. I learned how to diagnose just looking at the capacitors and the airflow in the motor and everything, and it turns out that lo and behold, I had a bad run capacitor, and I added a boost start capacitor, which was probably unnecessary, but figured it couldn't hurt. And I had a bad thermistor, so it was freezing up because the AC computer wasn't getting the signal that it was too cold. And somebody removed the thermal protection from the compressor and just hardwired it. So I've already replaced all of that, and now the AC unit seems to be working as it did before. In fact, with the startup booster, it turns on and just blows cold air almost immediately. It's kind of awesome. But it also, while watching those YouTube videos, I came across all kinds of other videos about how much these things suck and all the turbulence they create and why they're so loud and how awful the airflow is. So I'm going to take a look at my RV and I'm going to see how much I can improve this air conditioning now. So I broke out the tools, and I've got my manometer, and I've got my anemometer, and my old school Radio Shack decibel meter, and I'm going to see how each of these vents flows, and I'm going to see what I can do about making them flow better, and making the thing quieter, and making it work more efficiently, and just all of the above. So the first thing I did was I looked at my vents, and I've got basically a straight line that comes off the AC and runs this way. And then I've got another straight line that comes off that side and runs over up to the master suite. In the master suite, there's 2 vents. And then going this way, there's 3 vents. And then, believe it or not, it actually extends into the garage and has a vent in the garage. And I'm not so sure I want air conditioning in my garage. It just doesn't seem necessary. And there's a nice big fan in here already that I can blow hot air out with, and it's got a side vent over there. So I think I'm going to eliminate that one and just run with the ones in the main cabin. I can always undo it if I decide I want it in the future, but my first step is just going to be measuring how much airflow is actually coming out of each one of these vents and how much pressure is built up behind them. And then I'm going to measure the decibel meter of how loud this thing is when it's running and get a baseline. And then I'll start digging into the vents and seeing what stuff looks like. Alright, to test the flow, I basically bought a mixing bucket that was the same size as my vents. Cut a hole in it that's the size of my anemometer, and I just hold it up there, hold the anemometer over. Let me see if I can get her up there real quick, just to show you. There we go. So basically like that. And I've got all my vents measured. And it was very enlightening. So let's look at the numbers. Alright, so here's my numbers for my baseline. My first vent, which I'm going from the front of the camper back, so that's the very front of the camper, is flowing 2.9 meters per second. And the second one in the master suite is doing 1.8. Vent number 3, which is the one right next to the thing, is flowing 0, not a thing. Vent number 4, which is the one over the kitchen over here, is flowing 1.4 meters per second, and then the one over the loft bed is flowing 2.8 for a total flow of 8.9 meters per second. I don't know that that number means anything, but I'm going to track it. My next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my manometer, and I'm going to look at the pressure inside each vent. And I don't know that that's going to tell me anything useful, but I haven't seen anybody else measure it, and I just happen to have a manometer, so let's find out. All right, and for pressures, I used 165 as a baseline, and that's pascals. So my vent in 1 was 20. Basically, it measured 185, so I did 185 minus 165, just trying to get an idea of the pressure versus ambient pressure. Vent 2, 16, vent 3, 1, vent 4, 8, and vent 4, 18. So that's a pretty big spread from a low of 0 or 1 to a high of 20. And I think it makes sense that you would want all your vents having an equal pressure, and that would probably equal or be equivalent to equal flow. There seems to be a correlation between the pressure and the flow. In fact, I might have to do some math on that, but that's interesting. The next thing I'm going to do is measure the decibel reading. Alright, so my decibel reader is meeting about 65. When I turn this off, I've got to adjust the settings on this thing now, because that's as low as it goes. So it's going lower than my meter will go. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to give a baseline for the decibels, unfortunately. But 65 when it's running, which isn't really that loud, honestly. So if I can make it quieter, that would be great. But I've seen people make videos where theirs were like in the 70s and almost 80 with super loud air conditioners. So I guess I'm pretty fortunate in that regard. All right, now I have my baseline data. 65 decibels while it's running. Got my flows and my pressures, and it's time to start diagnosing. All right, so I'm going to start at the front of my RV up here where the closet is and work my way back. And I opened this vent, and this was very interesting to me. There's a random piece of tape just on the top. I'm not sure why. But the other interesting thing is this vent continues back. And I'm going to see if I can get a video on the mirror here. So you can see that in that mirror, that continues back quite a ways. And it actually continues all the way up past these doors. And I can actually see that screw right there sticking through the duct, and then the duct ends right about here. So what that's doing, I think, I'm not a fluid engineer by any means, but you have air coming this way and it's continuing, and then it's creating a high pressure pocket back here, which creates a turbulent zone right here. And then that turbulence, because there's higher pressure in that cavity than what's coming, the air eventually turbulences down. And I think this is pretty akin to like a pickup box when you're driving down the highway, and how things don't blow around in the pickup box because the air coming over the cab actually creates a high pressure zone in the cab, and then the air kind of slides over it. And if you've ever seen people do testing on it that add the tailgates that air can get through, it actually can hurt their fuel economy because it creates more drag because that pressure zone's gone. But I think my theory here is that I need, instead of having a pressure zone, this air should come over and just gently be guided down. And so I'm going to try to build some kind of a baffle in there that I can tape up and end this duct at an angle so the air comes and then is directed down. So I got to figure out how I'm going to do that. But that's where I'm at. Alright, I just got back from the big box store and I got a NGX 150 piece of foam, and I got some aluminum foil tape, and I got some great stuff, window and door sealer, and I think that's what I'm going to need to fix up the end vents, and I'll show you what I'm going to do in there. So on the way to the big box store, I realized I have more than one potential issue here. Not only do I have to make this vent actually stop here, but there's a gap right here, and this aluminum foil tape makes me wonder what was originally in here. I'll probably find out when I take off some of the other vents, but there is a possibility that the air is actually escaping into this area. So I need to deal with that as well, which is what I got the gap sealer for. So my plan is to fill this gap with gap sealer and then just trim it back to the hole so that the air can't escape, and then build a baffle out of that foam board to come down here. It's hard to explain, so I think I'll just make it and then I'll show you. Alright, so I'm about halfway done with this vent, and what I've done is I've filled this void with window and gap sealer, and it doesn't cure too fast, and it's really open cell, so I think I might need to find a better solution. I picked it because I didn't want to like push the ceiling down and cause pressure issues, but I'll figure it out. And then I cut this piece, and as you can see, it goes all the way to the end of the duct, and I tried to angle it so it would angle the air in and down. It's the same on the other side. And then instead of just a straight line, I tried to make this a little bit circular so it would bring air down, and I don't know if it's increasing the flow at all, but I'm not done yet, and I haven't got the vent back in, so it's not time to measure yet, but I'm going to let this foam cure up a little bit, and I'm going to go get some lunch, and then I come back. Hopefully I can trim it up a little bit because it's still really gooey right now. That's where I'm at. Alright, well, I had to put some more of that stuff in there. I found out that piece of tape up there was because apparently from the factory they use a hole saw to drill these, and they drill a hole right up through the top of this duct, so they put a piece of tape over it. So I filled it in with foam, and this foam's going to take a while to cure. So while it's doing that, I decided to start looking inside this duct, and lo and behold, as I started looking in, there's a couple of issues in here. One being that the output from the blower fan is all the way against this side. And this is the side that feeds the front that only has 2 ducts. And this side, I learned, well, look at that, it goes both ways. So I found a whole nother vent in the bathroom that I'd never noticed before. So actually, this one is feeding 4 or 5 if you include the garage versus 2. And the air that's coming out of here is closer to this side than that side. I'm not sure that that really affects much, but I'm gonna see what I can do to build a better baffle in here. There's plenty of videos on YouTube of people building these baffles to direct this airflow, because it's basically just a square box, and that air comes down and it hits the bottom, and that causes turbulence, and then it builds up pressure, and then eventually the pressure escapes through those
vents, but it's not really a good system at all. And there's actually aftermarket products made for some air conditioners, but mine's too old, so I'm gonna have to make my own. That's what I'm starting to look at. And I'm gonna get this area cleaned up and get some measurements and start working on that while that one cures. And then I realized I'm gonna do the exact same thing I did to that one, to the one over the loft bed, and that'll block it off from going to the garage. And then because this one is an end point, I'm gonna have to do the same thing to this one. So I've got quite a bit of work to do to get my end points of my ducts healthy. But one good thing is that the duct going that way already has a round curved turn going both ways. I haven't checked that one yet, but if that one has a round curve going forward, that's going to be amazing, because I was expecting them to just be square in the air that goes straight in and hit a wall and then create a turbulence before it goes that way. But at least on this side, I don't have to worry about that. So that is really good news. But onward. Well, wouldn't you know it, when looking this way, they have the same rounded back corner, which is cool. But when looking that way, it just dead ends. So that's actually encouraging air going that way to go to the left and then hit that flat wall and create a turbulence pressure pocket right there. That is not good. So I am going to have to figure out how to create a plug to push in there so that the air just goes to the right. Yeah. Alright, so I got a piece of that foam cut. Let's see if you can get a picture of it. Yeah, so now it'll just go that way. I think that'll work a lot better. And then after thinking about it, on the other side, this one's not really doing a very good job over on this side. Where is it? Because it's sending half the air to the bathroom, which means it's going to get way more flow, which would explain why there's zero coming out of these first two over here. So I think I'm going to rethink not doing anything with this one too. Now, as I start digging in to this one over here, the loft bed, it turns out I'm not the first person who thought it was not necessary to air condition the garage. Somebody's already been up here and plugged it off. And they didn't do a super good job. And I'm gonna definitely cut some of that out and add to it and make it better. But they did do it, which would explain why I'm getting zero flow in the garage. So that first wedge I made was 4 inches and 9 inches. And then I just sort of made a triangle and rounded it so that it wasn't as turbulent. You know, if you can make round turns in air, my understanding is it's like an infinite number of little redirections versus hit and bounce. I'm not an engineer, but I did watch a couple of videos on air and fluid dynamics and came to the conclusion that I should try to round these things as much as possible. So on the other side, I realized I have one vent in the bathroom that's going that way, and then I have 3 vents that I want to go this way. And so I think I'm going to try building another 4-inch wedge, but I'm going to bring the tip, instead of at the very left, I'm going to bring it over to capture 1/4 of the airflow. The duct is 8 inches wide, so that means it'll be cut right in half. I just realized that as I was talking about it. And try to redirect 1/4 of the airflow to that bathroom fan and 3/4 of it to these other 3 vents. Let's see if we can't get some more air coming out of those. So I'll get it cut and I'll get it installed. Alright, so the side going to these 3 vents and the one in the bathroom, I ended up with this wedge. And so 1/4, it's 2 inches over. It's kind of hard to see in here because it's really crowded, but this is 8 inches, so I put the 2 inches over, so 1/4 of the air should catch that side and 3/4 should catch that side. And after I get this all foamed up and taped in, I think it'll be a pretty decent solution. I also see that I've got major leakage in over this side into the attic where it could be sucking air from, and I don't want it doing that. I want it sucking the air from inside the camper. So I'll be sealing all of this up. It's also over here. Well, I just filled all of them with foam, and I got around the vent in here, and I got there, and then the other 3 as well. That stuff takes 8 full hours to cure, so it's going to be a tomorrow project, cutting out all the excess. And I purposely overfilled them because I wanted to cut around them and make them kind of tight fitting. In the meantime, I guess I'm giving up on my plan of doing one thing at a time versus my baseline, since I missed a duct completely and was measuring one that was already plugged off. My baseline's kind of blown all to heck, so I guess I'll just get the ductwork done and then do a measurement. So, onward and forward. Alright, so while I'm waiting for all of this stuff to cure, I'm going to work on a plenum. I don't feel like spending $180 on one, especially when they don't make one for one my old, as old as my air conditioner. My old, I don't know what I was saying. But by tomorrow, this stuff should be all nice and cured and ready to sand. I ran out, but I went and got more and got that one done. I keep forgetting about that one. But what I'm doing is I went to the box store and I picked up a 4x8 sheet of this polystyrene, and it is 1.5 inches thick, which comes out pretty nicely. And I cut out the size I need to plug that hole, so that you can imagine sitting on this side, and now I just need to cut the holes in it to channel the air from there, and there. And since it's 4 layers, I can figure out all the geometry on it, where everything needs to get cut, and then I can take the layers apart and I can work on each individual layer, and then I can put them together 2 layers at a time and sand, and hopefully I can come out with a good plenum for, you know, 20 bucks, 30 bucks, whatever this material ended up costing. But we'll see how it goes. Alright, so I've got everything drawn on here. That's my dump, and I want 1/3 of it going to the front because there's 2 out of 6 vents. And I want 2/3 of it going to this side because there's 4 vents, including the one in the bathroom. And then I've got on the side measured out where the discharges go, and then over here, and then I just need to figure out how I'm going to cut these layers so that eventually they end up where they need to be. It's going to be a little bit of an exercise in 3D thinking, which I do not excel at, but it should be fun, so we'll see what I come up with. Alright, it's the next morning. All my foam is ready to trim up, and I haven't trimmed any of it up, and I overfilled a couple of these a lot, especially this one. That one's going to take a little bit of cleanup. But I also got my
box fabbed up last night, and I have it just test fitting. It's just sitting in there. It's not installed at all. And I'm running the air conditioner. And there's no seal on top of it, so it's not even sealed against the air conditioner. And the air conditioner is not sucked down, so it's probably pulling in some outside air from that light. And again, haven't trimmed these up at all. That's one of my next steps. I'm going to do each one individually. I also kind of went over crazy on this one that I'm calling the mystery duct because I didn't even know it was there when I started. But after test fitting my little box here with, you know, like, it's just press fit, so there's gaps and not all that well sealed, I decided let's just go ahead and measure the airflow coming out of these ducts, because let's see what it's doing. And so I started a new row here. I'm just calling it test fit box. And my flow on vent 1 from my baseline increased from 2.9 meters per second to 6.927, which is incredible. Vent 2 went from 1.8 to 4.12, but vent 3 went from 0 to 2.13. So there's actually flow coming out of that vent. Vent 4 went from 1.4 to 4.27, and vent 5 went from 2.8 to 3.704. And vent 5 is that one that's really overfilled, so I'm surprised there's anything coming out of it at all. And then I actually measured the one in the bathroom, and it's flowing a lot. So I think I'm going to move that diverter over a little bit that I made and see if I can find some balance for that. But right now, just with this test fit, I went from 8.9 meters per second of total airflow out of all the vents to 21.061, which is just, that's an insane increase. It's 2.37 times, or 136.64% increase. I've seen a lot of other videos where people are claiming this times increase as their percent increase, but I'm a math guy, so I have to show both values because that's just how I am. But I'm pretty motivated at this point. I think this is pretty incredible. I can't wait to get all my ducts cleaned up and balanced, and from this point on forward, my goal is going to be to get all of these air ducts flowing equally. And you can see that vent 1 and 2 are the two that go to the master suite, and vent 2 is the first one in the duct, and then vent 1 is the last one in the duct. So I need to grab a little bit more air out of vent 2 to balance those two out. And then on these vents, 3 is the first one, 4 is the second one, and 5 is the third one. And vent 6 is the one in the bathroom that's just split out from the other 3. So it's getting a lot of air, so I need to definitely move that baffle. And then I need to clean vent 5 up because it's really plugged, and then see what my flow is and see if I can get all of those to flow the same. So that's what I'm going to spend this morning doing, is just test fitting, measuring, test fitting, measuring, cleaning up vents. It's going to be time consuming, but it's something I really enjoy, so let's get her done. Alright, here's the little baffle I made, and there's no way I'm going to be able to film showing you how I put this in place, but I can at least show you what I'm making. So one thing that's different about my unit is that the dump is way over here in the corner, and it seems like the new ones, they moved it to the middle. And so even building just a wedge, like a lot of people do in their videos, was going to be really hard because of how close this is over here. So I decided to give a stab at making one of these boxes out of layers. And so I measured out where everything needed to be, and I just cut out these layers. And this was rather time consuming, to be honest. I'm obviously not done with it yet. And then once I get everything test fitted and I sand this up, I'm going to have to glue all these layers together. And this is polystyrene, so my understanding is wood glue should work pretty well. But
you can see that from the dump going to the front that way is this side. And since it's 2 out of 6 vents, it is 1/3 of the flow. And this one, I'm actually going to sand back a little bit more to get a little bit more, but I wanted to see how it flowed before I knew whether I needed more flow on this side or this side. So I need to get my vents cleaned up and then start balancing everything, and then I'll know which side to take more from. And so I originally had this baffle right about there, 2 inches over, because there's 4 vents on this thing, and so 2 inches would have been 1/4 of the flow, but it was obviously getting way more than that. So I moved it over a good amount. And once I get it balanced, I will tape that in place, or maybe I'll just put some super glue on it or something to keep it from moving, but it's in there pretty good. I have a hard time even moving it, so maybe I'm overthinking it. But now I'm going to put everything back in and rerun my flows and see if I get a good balance to the vent in the bathroom versus the ones over here. And I'm going to clean up these 2 vents, because at this point I think I can start balancing those 2, but I need to get them cleaned up so I know their actual flow first. But that's where I'm at. All right, I got this vent cleaned up, and I think you can kind of see what I was going for now. When the air comes down, it should hit this and have a nice curve in, and it also has, for the end of it, it should catch stuff and push it this way. And I don't know, I might have overthought it, but it looks nice. Well, after cleaning all the vents up, I got some very interesting different results. I ended up not getting any more flow out of vent 3 again, which tells me that having vent 5 just completely overfilled with foam was causing back pressure and stuff to come out of it. I also don't have anything coming out of vent 4, but I have more coming out of vent 5 than I have yet. So that tells me that I'm definitely sealing up leaks and getting more flow, but I also have a bunch more coming out of the first vent than the second vent, but ironically cleaning them up actually got more air out of the second vent up front. The air is coming down nicely from that little baffle I built, but another interesting thing is even after moving that wedge over, vent 6 is still getting a ton more air than it should, so I'll be moving that wedge over even more. The numbers I'm comparing to are over here. So I've got 5.38 coming out of vent 6, where my average rear vent is only flowing 2.4, so it's getting a lot more air than it should. And then my front vents are flowing an average of 5.543 per vent. So I've got some balancing to do for sure. But in true form, every time you make a change, it affects everything else. So I'm going to have to give some thought to what the next best thing to adjust is. I think I'm going to start probably with vent 1 and 2 because they've been really consistent ratio wise. And so I think if I baffle vent 2 50%, that might even out the flow. So I think I'm going to focus on just that next and not change anything else and see what I learned from that. Alright, so I built this baffle for this vent, and the vent is 8 inches wide, so I made it 4 inches wide, figuring, block 50% of the flow and might balance them out. But now I'm actually getting more flow out of this vent than the next one. I'm getting 7.2 meters per second out of this one and 5.5 out of that one. So now the question is, how much smaller do I make this one? Because if I go too small, then I have to start over. So I'm thinking I'm gonna take, I don't know, 1/4 inch off each side and see where we're at. This is gonna be time consuming, but it's fun. Alright, so to try to balance these two vents, I started out at 4 inches, which is about 10.5 centimeters, and I was getting 7.2 and 5.5. So I cut it down to 9.5, and then I got 6.3 and 5.3, and then I went down to 9 and got 5.9, almost 6, and 4.76, and then I cut it down to 8.5, and now I'm at 5.3 and 4.7, which is really close. So I think I'm gonna leave it there until I balance the other ones before I cut it down to 8. I can't tell a difference just putting my hand in front of them at this point. They feel like they're flowing very, very equally. So that's pretty awesome. And it's definitely cooling off in here quicker. Oh man. My wife is going to be so mad if I don't clean up this mess when I'm done. But I will. I will. Well, wouldn't you know it? My anemometer sensor decided to not work. I mean, the bearings went out, so can't really depend on it anymore, but with some adjustments, I do have my vents all blowing at least within a couple meters per second of each other. The ones at the front are still blowing 5, 5.5, and then the ones back here are 3 to 5. But I'm gonna pause on tuning the vents until my replacement sensor gets here, because it just kind of seems like a waste of time, and I'm going to move on to the other things I'm doing to make this air conditioner work way, way better. And one of those things is going to be cutting out a little bit more of this so that there can be more flow into the return. Then I got some stuff on the roof to do, so I'll show you when I get up there. Well, this is the upside unit. And it's one of the older ones, so the cold box is metal, not made out of styrofoam. And they did try to put some insulation on it with this thin little sheet of styrofoam and thin little sheet over here that's half ripped off. And for some reason black thin sheet over here, but there's some issues where this isn't sealed, so it's sucking in outside air, which isn't good. I don't think the seal around this thing is exceptional. You can see daylight through it from the bottom. And so I'm gonna figure out how to seal that up and insulate it better. I'm also gonna insulate the cold pipe so it doesn't absorb all the heat from outside before it gets into the cold box. And I'm gonna clean it really, really good because it's very, very dirty. I can see the coil over here has some fins that need straightened. So when I clean it, I'll make sure all those are nice and straight. And make sure we get the maximum airflow through this. And I have a couple videos I saw on people that improve the airflow on the hot side of this thing, so I'm going to do that. And yeah, so I'm going to get started with that cold pipe and go from there. Alright, step 1 up on the roof is done. I got the cold pipe wrapped up, and I sealed off that hole down there with some aluminum tape before I put the foam against it, so that hole should be nice and sealed. And it's freaking hot up here, so I think I'm going to hold off on the rest of the stuff up here and do it in the early morning or an evening, because man, this sucks. So I got more stuff to do inside. Let's get to it. Alright, back inside, and she's doing a pretty good job of keeping it really comfortable at 68 in here. And it's really hot outside, so I'm tickled. And it's really awesome to be able to feel the air coming out of the vents too. Like, that's really, truly awesome. My next project is something that most people are probably going to think is crazy. I went to the Home Depot and I got this 4-inch 16 by 20 MERV 12 whole house filter. And maybe I should set it down so you can actually see it. I picked it because it was in stock at Lowe's and Home Depot, so I know it's a really common size, so I can get one anywhere. And if it can flow enough air for a whole house, I think it should do just fine in my camper. Excuse me. So I'm gonna build a box for it that's going to double as a hold down for the air conditioner, and it will replace this contraption. Excuse me. And then I got this grate that I'm gonna put over it. I couldn't find a grate that was 16 by 20, but I found a 20 by 20, so it'll work. It'll just have 4 inches on one end that doesn't flow anything, but nobody will be able to tell. So I think it'll look pretty good once I get it up there, but I gotta start fabbing the box for it now, so I'm gonna get to it. Alright, here's what I came up with. So I've got this thing I made out of like 150-year-old reclaimed wood from tearing down a really old garage. And then this is the original piece that fits in there. So that's how much bigger it's going to be. It'll look a little silly, but instead of having this thing bolted and then around the wall to hold the air conditioner down, I'll just use these 2 pieces of wood, and I'll poke the 4 holes in them. And then I'll also put some wood screws into the wood, and then I'll attach to this frame really well. I'm going to have to figure out where to put those. I'm going to have to go back to the camper and dry fit it. But, and then the filter will just slide right in, and it's nice and flush. And then I'll figure out where it goes and where I'm going to mount it, and then I'll fill in the gaps on the ends so that air doesn't get sucked in around it. And I think I'll have a pretty good filter. I think it'll look pretty sharp up there too once I sand this all down and finish it. But for now, I gotta go figure out where it's gonna go on the ceiling, and it's a little heavy, so this should be fun. Well, she's dipping down to 63 decibels. I think I started at 65. I'll have to check my spreadsheet. But this is what I got. Back up a little bit. I built that box and I mounted it up there, and I've got that MERV 12 filter up in there, which is kind of hard to see, but seems to be doing the trick. Didn't seem to affect the airflow at all, but I won't really know until I get the new sensor for my anemometer, because it's hard to tell just by feel. But I'm getting closer to being done with this project. I am on day 3, and not evenings. I'm doing this over the 4th of July weekend on my days off, and I've put about 2 12-hour days into this project so far, and then it's about noon on the 3rd day. And I still got a ways to go. I have a couple more things to do on the roof, and I need to finish balancing my vents, which I can't do until my new anemometer sensor gets here. And then I'll be done. But I got a couple more things to do on the roof, and it's really hot, so I think I might call it a day at noon and go to bed early tonight and get up early tomorrow to do the stuff on the roof, because man, it sucks doing it in the heat. We'll see you then. Alright, another improvement I saw. A guy did some testing on these fins, and apparently they flow air pretty good that way, but not this way. And if you look at the other side of them, it kind of makes sense, because there's actually like a groove here, so the air would hit that and then create turbulence going this way. But going this way, it wouldn't. It would just create a vacuum like a pickup box truck. But they put these fins this way, and this is the intake where the air comes this way, and then the output this way, the same way. And so this guy found out that by cutting those fins out and then just using some what do you call this, corrugated, I don't know, whatever it is. It's mesh used for stucco, but it's covered in something that makes it not rust. And his testing with his anemometer was that this stuff barely cut down on the airflow at all. So I'm giving it a try too. Yeah, I think it'll look pretty cool up there, held in by rivets, and yeah. But for tomorrow, my AC is still freezing up, so I think I got to break down and clean the coils tomorrow, because I haven't done that yet. Been putting it off while I do all this other stuff that creates dust, and I think now is the time to do it. And I'm not going to take the time to build an insulated box for the cold box on this air conditioner if it's low on Freon and I end up having to replace it. That just seems like a waste. So I think my next step is just going to be cleaning those coils really good and making sure I get the intake free flowing so that there's as much airflow as possible, and then see if it's freezing up after that. Because I already bought a new anti-freeze thermistor for it, so I think the only other option for it is airflow and a Freon leak. So we'll see what tomorrow brings. As you can see, the sun's going down, so it's late. It's finally cooled off enough to come outside and do this, but tomorrow's another day. All right, it's day 4 of what I'm calling my ultimate RV AC modification. The everything bagel of AC modification. This is a lot of work. It's 8:30 in the morning and it is already hot up here, so I'm glad I got up here to do it. My dogs are barking at birds in the tree like usual. But this thing's got a lot of bent fins on it. But the good news is it's not all that dirty. I can see through it. And the cold side is a little dirtier. It's got some bugs and stuff in it, but not as many bent fins. So hopefully I can get this all cleaned out and straighten all these fins out. Get some good flow. But I think I did realize one of my mistakes. And if you look down in the incoming, I relocated this box to right here. And it actually takes up a lot of that hole that the air comes through, that it pulls through, which is basically a restriction. So I'm going to move that box. And I think I'm just going to pull it up and mount it to the side over here flush so that the hole's still big and the air can get up and over. And maybe that will help it not freeze up. But for now, I'm just going to get the good old-fashioned foaming cleaner out, follow the directions to a T, and get the cover on it. And we'll get that box relocated, and we'll go from there. Well, it's now 9:30. It is getting hotter. Whew. As you can see from the stream flowing off the camper here, the cleaner stuff seemed to do a pretty good job of getting stuff out of there. And this brush on top seems to work really well for straightening these fins. They're all about as straight as I can get them. And I relocated this box up to here, so that hole is now wide open, and I'll show that from the bottom too. But this one looks remarkably better. So I'm going to get the cover thrown back on this thing and get to working on airflow. There is one more thing I could do up here, and I could insulate the cold box much better to keep hot air out, but I don't really feel like doing that until I know that this AC is going to work. I'm still questioning whether it's low on Freon because it's freezing up, or if it's just an airflow issue, or what. So I'm going to get the airflow figured out and then see if this thing is dependable before I waste time on that. Because if I end up buying a new AC, that would be a complete waste of time. So would insulating that pipe, but yeah, that only took 10 minutes. So get the covers on and we'll get back down to work. All right, the cover's back on. That's what it looks like. And I think that turned out pretty good. I have no complaints about how that looks. And in case anyone watching is having a mini heart attack, yes, I did verify none of the rivets are touching the coil. The ones on top are above it, the ones on the side are to the side of it,
and the ones on the bottom are a good, I don't know, 20 millimeters away from it, or maybe 30, or they're spaced out pretty good. So now, back to airflow inside. All right, back inside, and you can see that moving that box opened that hole back up. I zip tied the wires out of the way, and I don't think I'm going to make that hole much better flowing than that. And in hindsight, that's kind of how it flowed stock, because this is the stock thing that was up there, and basically that box sat really low, and it sat right here, which means it was a good, I don't know, 5.5 inches, 6 inches down from that hole. So that hole wasn't obstructed at all. And that hole, I think, was probably the restriction point in the stock flow. This hole is much bigger with the box sitting here. Maybe this hole was smaller than that one. I don't know, but I think that's about as free flowing as I can make it without redoing wiring. So we'll see how that works. All right, in the search of better airflow, I was at Target to get some other supplies, and I saw that they had filters for sale at Target, which kind of surprised me. And so I thought, let's go look at those filters and see if there's any rating on them for restriction. And I certainly couldn't find one. I read everything on the box. The only thing I could really find was the MERV rating. And where is that even? Like, they kind of hide this stuff. It says airflow guaranteed, which I find funny, but they don't give any stats on it. Like, how much airflow? What is the actual restriction? But down here, that does say it's a MERV 12. Airflow and CFM. Oh, initial resistance. I didn't see this when I was looking before. So apparently if you're flowing that many CFM, that's going to be your resistance. I wonder what that IWC is. I'll have to look that up. I have no idea what the resistance of the stock filter would be. It's just a little piece of foam, but it's also not that big. So I'll have to go find some information on that rating and see what the flow of this filter is. But the other thing I noticed when I was at Target was that they sell a 20 by 20 by 4 on the shelf. They had more of them than anything, and they were almost $10 cheaper than the 20 by 16 I got at Home Depot. And Home Depot didn't have 20 by 20s, so I don't know how common of a size it is, but it is considerably bigger than this. And so I'm going to do my best to get as much surface area on this thing exposed so air can pull through it, instead of choking it down like I was. And then I'm going to look up these numbers and see just how much more restrictive this is than this. If it ends up being too restrictive, I might have to find a different filter. But right now my theory is that the reason it was freezing up was the size of that hole, because it froze up when the filter wasn't even installed. So I don't think the filter was the problem. But now that it's all cleaned up, I'm going to run it. It's supposed to get up to 90 degrees today, so with that hole open, that should give me a good idea of whether it's going to freeze up or not. And on my little plenum here, I'm going to cut away some of the bottom of this so that it's not blocking that filter, so that more of that filter can have air coming through it. I don't want to cut away too much because I'm not done tuning this, and I don't know how much more I'm going to cut away from it. On the other hand, the hole just kind of goes like that, so as long as I don't interfere with the actual hole, I think I'm safe to cut away here. So that's what I'm going to work on next and get that back up in there. And I won't be gluing this together until I get my new anemometer sensor, so that
I can make sure that these holes are tuned. And right now there's still a lot more air going through this one than this one. So I'm going to try making this one a little steeper. If that's true, I don't know if my bad sensor was actually measuring accurately. So when I get the new one, I'll test that and then figure out what I have to adjust. And it's nice to have these in layers so I can do them one at a time. But once I get it tuned or balanced as well as I can, I'm actually going to glue all these layers together and make it one solid thing, and then I'll sand it flat, and then I'm either going to paint it or cover it in aluminum tape or something to make it a little more robust, because it's just foam, and it's kind of like that foam you get with flowers. Like you can easily break chunks off of it. So that's what I'm doing next. And it's currently 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's only 64 degrees in the camper right now. So it's actually really nice in here, but it's getting hot out quick. So I think by 1 o'clock it's going to be about 90 degrees. So I'm going to try to get that plenum adjusted in the next half an hour back up in there so I can just turn the AC on and see how it goes today. Let's get her done. Well, started cleaning up my mess, so it looks a little nicer in here. These carpets need cleaned so badly. I'm inclined to rip them out and just put new linoleum in at this point. But here's what I got. I've got that hole as unobtrused as I can get it. I don't know if that's even the right word. And then I cut out some space in here to get past this so I can take advantage of the entire filter over here as well. And I can actually feel air being pulled through right here, so that's a good sign that it was a little restricted. Then I cut that back to make sure it wasn't blocking that, and in hindsight I didn't need to cut that top one quite so much, but you know, hindsight's 20/20. And I'm just gonna let it run and see if it freezes up. I'm not gonna put the filter in it so I can see it. And it's already up to a hot enough temperature outside that the air conditioning's on, and I've got it set to 68. It's 11 a.m. so we'll see how hot it gets today and if this thing freezes over or not. And if it doesn't, then that'll be a good sign. I also decided it was time to get the flare out and take a look at temperatures and see what I can learn from that. So that's what I'm going to do next. Alright, the flare is kind of awesome. You can really tell where your heat's coming from. My vacuum is hot because I used it apparently. The overlays aren't perfect with the camera, but that little dot is coming from the vacuum. These windows are obviously where most of the heat comes from. That one's hotspot is 31.5 Celsius. And that one's 30 Celsius, and that one's 40 Celsius. So that's my big offender, apparently. I could probably do some window treatments and get much better performance just from absorbing less heat. And that one's also about 40 Celsius, and it doesn't have a shade to put over it, which would probably be a good addition. But what really surprises me is just how much heat comes from these sunroofs. That one's almost 50 C. That one's 42, 43. And we got one in here too, master. And it's 41, 42. And also the windows in here. That one's not so bad, 21 degrees. That one's about 22. That one's going to be hotter, I bet. Yeah, 33. The sun's obviously coming from that direction, so the windows facing that way are the hot ones. But the real interesting thing is looking in here. And you see that it's only getting down to it keep running. And yeah, one interesting thing, for some reason the fuel gauge on my generator panel is warm. I'm not sure what's going on there, but it's interesting.
Well, I think I'm gonna wrap this video here and call this a successful mod improvement. It's up to 80 degrees outside and the air conditioning is still keeping up. It hasn't frozen over yet and it's cycling on and off, so I'm gonna let it run for the week and see if it freezes over before I go any further. It's supposed to get up to 100 degrees this week, which is insanely hot for Helena, Montana. But here's the checklist I started with. My ultimate RV AC overhaul. Everything bagel done right. I decided that I liked the bagel pun, but I did fix the leaks, so I can cross that off. So that was all the spray foam I did, and there's no more leaks. My plenum fix is still in the works. I still need to get my new anemometer and make sure it's balanced, but so I'm not going to cross that one off. Same with balancing the vents. They're doing pretty good right now. Like, I can actually feel air coming from that one just sitting here, so that's nice, but not done yet. My MERV 12 filter I got installed, so I can cross that off. I did insulate the cold pipe. I didn't insulate the cold box, and I'm going to wait, make sure this air conditioner doesn't need replaced so I don't waste my time. I improved the hot side airflow by cutting that plastic out and putting in better venting, and I cleaned the coils. So I guess I'll make a follow-up video once I get a new sensor for my anemometer and finish that plenum and balancing the vents, and if the AC works for the next couple of weeks without freezing over, they'll insulate that cold box better. So, see you in the next one.